Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Chairman Hewart?
Here.
Commissioner Say?
Here.
Commissioner Putnam?
Here.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Here.
Thank you.
So we have a quorum, and hopefully we'll have some more members soon.
Here we
And
go.
just for the record, we
here they
also
are.
have Isaac Rosen, City Attorney, on as well.
Okay. And here comes Bart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Sorry,
And
guys.
it looks like we have a couple commissioners coming in, so maybe we'll just redo the roll call vote and also make note if we have any absences.
Two more for the room.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Vice Chairman Glass?
Here.
Chairman Hewart?
Here.
Commissioner Say?
Here.
Commissioner Putnam?
Here.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Here.
All commissioners are
Okay.
present in the meeting today.
Thank you. Okay, first, consent calendar. Any comments or motions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none? Call for vote.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes?
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Glass?
Yes.
Chairman Hewart?
Yes?
Commissioner Say?
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam?
Yes.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of resolutions, either discussion or a motion for all three or one at a time, how anybody would like.
I'll make a motion to approve 2117, 2118, and 2119 as presented.
Okay,
I'll second it.
any discussion? On the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, please.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes?
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Glass?
Yes.
Chairman Hewart?
Yes?
Commissioner Say?
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam?
Yes.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now to general business, the first application. Michael, please. Or-
Rosie is going to take this item.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Item number one on the agenda is requesting for a transient rental license and coastal development permit to allow the renting or leasing of a room with or without table boards in a dwelling unit for periods of fewer than 30 consecutive days duration at 308 Clarissa Avenue. The owner and applicant is Michael L. Ellis. The applicant is present in this Planning Commission meeting. The property is located in the high-density residential zone. The property is a two-story structure that contains 5 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and is developed with a residential use consistent with the Avalon General Plan, which is allowed under the 2021 growth policy. The property manager for the unit is listed as Susan Waters. Contact information is included within the staff report. The transient rental housing impact statement submitted by the applicant declares that the property has been used as a vacation home by the owner. Avalon Municipal Code Section 3/3.05 provides that the Planning Commission shall consider whether granting the transient rental license shall result in any year-round residential located adjacent to the property's transient rentals having more than a majority of the adjacent residences permitted or licensed for transient rental use. Upon analysis, the saturation map indicates that the applying property is located on a street in which approximately 50% of the properties are actively operating as transient rentals. The Planning Commission may consider this in deciding whether to approve the application. The proposed project is categorically exempt under Section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines, minor alterations in land use limitations, which do not result in change in land use or density. The project requires a coastal development permit under Section 9/8.102 B2V of the Avalon Municipal Code. The project is not within the 300-foot appealable zone. The city staff has not received any comments in favor or in opposition of the transient rental license. Staff recommendation is we find the project categorically exempt under section 15305 of the state CEQA guidelines, minor alterations and land use limitations. Adopt the findings necessary to support approval of the coastal development permit, including that the project is not within the 300-foot appealable zone. Accept the findings necessary to approve the transient rental license and find that the application is allowed under the 2021 growth policy. This concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions.
Any questions for staff before we open the public hearing? Okay, open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to testify? Please come forward, give your name and address.
I'm Mike Ellis. I own 208 Clarissa, and I'm excited about being part of the community. Owned it since 2017. I'm looking forward to sharing my house.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Anybody? No?
Do you plan on sleeping the 10 people or 12?
It's approved for 12, and it varies from 2 people to 12. It's not a consistent.
Gotcha.
I mean, when my family came over, we had 13, but 2 of them were babies. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did we get any comments via correspondence or?
I do not have any electronic.
Okay.
We did not receive anything before in opposition or in favor.
Okay.
So nothing?
No.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Discussion. Motion. Anybody have a motion for this?
I'd make a motion to approve
Okay, it's
with
been
staff recommendation.
I'll second.
okay, moved and approved. Any discussion on the motion? None? Seems straightforward. Please call for a vote.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Glass,
Yes.
Chairman Hewart,
Yes?
Commissioner Say,
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam,
Yes.
and Commissioner Phillips.
No.
So our voting is 6 ayes and 1 nay.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider the adoption of a mitigated neg deck to comply with the CEQA Act for the Cabrillo Mole Phase 2 project. This is also to authorize the filing of a notice of determination and approve the project per the resolution that's part of the packet. And so as part of the staff report, I also have a quick presentation. We're going to be going over there. I'm going to kind of set it up first in terms of what the project conceptually is for purposes of the M&D, and then I'm going to move into the PowerPoint presentation just to give the commissioners more of a visual update on what we're actually talking about as part of this. So bear with me real quick. So as many of you are aware, the City of Avalon has a multi-phase project to rehabilitate and substantially improve the Cabrillo Mole Ferry Terminal project, or the Mole, which is what I'll refer to it from here on out, which is a multimodal transportation hub used by the cross-channel carrier passengers traveling between the mainland and Avalon, and as a gathering place for residents and visitors. This is essentially the first point as well as the last point of contact that many have as they're coming in and out of the island. As proposed, this phase that we're moving into is going to be building on the last phase that we just completed, which was phase 1. Phase 1, we really took the Cabrillo Mole decking and we rehabilitated it from the underside as well as the portion of the the deck itself, and then replace the grates. Phase 2 is looking at that footprint, and I'll go into this in just a minute, but to really reimagine what this transportation hub is. So completely rehabilitating the current structures that exist on the deck. There are other projects that are planned, but those will be phased, and I'll talk a little bit more about some future proposed phases in there as well. So as proposed for the purposes of the phase 2, what we're looking at is really replacing the structures on the deck. The goal of phase 2 is really to create a memorable and iconic sense of place, as well as a viable source of commercial lease income for the city of Avalon, while efficiently serving all intended functions operating within this holistic system. The project is expected to begin construction in late 2022 or 2021, early 2022, and it'll be completed late 2022, a portion of that, and then finally finishing up in 2024. The CEQA side of things, a mitigated neg deck was prepared in March of 2021 by Birdseye Planning Group, which is the city's lead planning consultant at the direction of the city. The M&D and initial study have been prepared and have been available for public review on City Hall, at the city's website, and on the state's CEQA.net, which is their web portal for environmental documents for the required 30 days. The city has received one comment from a state agency, Caltrans, and basically what Caltrans has said is they don't expect the project approval to result in any direct adverse impact to the state highway system. They're more concerned about our roadways, less so on ferry terminals. And because we're not connected or related to the state road, they didn't have any comment, essentially. A phase 1 cultural resources report was also prepared for this project, and as part of the process, a search was conducted by Native American Heritage Commission, and a total of 7 tribal representatives identified as part of this search were notified during the preparation of the phase 1 cultural resources report. We have been in contact, and one tribe, at least, representative has requested ongoing consultation throughout this process, just to make sure that there are no significant cultural findings within that. So with that, I'm going to now transition just to give everyone more of a broader overview into what we're actually talking about. And so this first slide really just talks about a brief timeline of what the mole has. The original mole was constructed, and you can see a picture of it when the steamer ship used to come up to that mole structure. And it's undergone some changes over the years, and now it's time to really reimagine what that space is. And so when we're looking at the scope of the project, particularly within the grant funding that we have for this phase 2, what we're talking about is in this blue line. This dashed blue line is the defined project scope. And so we're limited in the amount of, or in the project's funding sources to only look at substantial improvements that exist within that blueprint. We can't go into the water. We can't go into some of the other elements. That's going to have to be phased into future projects. And we do have plans for additional improvements to that entire area. But for the purposes of this study and the purposes of Mole Phase 2, what we're talking about is this little containment site on the mole structure itself. When you look at this slide is really just kind of looking at the existing structures as they currently sit. Right now, you've got kind of a breezeway, and so when we're looking at phase 2, this is just kind of one option to really reimagine that space. These are just conceptual at this point, conceptual ideas, just to give people a basic understanding of where we could go and to start the conversation and to start the dialogue. The city has already engaged in multiple conversations with our community stakeholders, with the Catalina Express, with the Catalina Island Company, through the Chamber of Commerce, and with community groups, just to get a better sense of what are their needs, what is their what is their needs, what are their priorities with a reinvention of the Cabrillo Mole Terminal. And so that is going to get folded into a more robust conceptual design, at which point we'll be bringing these back at different touch points to the planning commissioners to seek out additional thoughts and to get additional feedback from the commission, as well as to come back to the commissioners throughout this process to obtain the necessary permits in order to move this process forward. Right now, we're still in that discovery phase. We're still soliciting the input, but we find that people, especially community members, respond better when they've got some general ideas of kind of where we want to go. And so this is kind of the purpose for that. On the next slide, this is kind of a cutout of the reimagined circulation and what it could be. This is kind of looking at things a little bit differently, incorporating additional parking as well as providing for a clear delineation for additional modes of transportation. You can see there's a potential sidewalk that would traverse through there along with some green space. There's also a little drop-off area as people come in. Think like when you come into the airport, you got a loading and unloading zone. You're just there to drop people off or pick people up and keep the car running and then continue on. And then there's some additional parking spaces in the golf cart. Down at the C ramp, that would be another phase, and there's some conceptual ideas to eventually maybe level that off and add to the available space for parking or for other uses and bring that up to the street level. It's already an existing structure. Permitting-wise, it might be a much easier process to push through, but that's right now out of the scope of this project. It really just kind of ends right before that ramp. And so, again, this is not the codified plans. This is just to get those conversations started. And when we're talking about the containment area, these are just some of those initial things. So looking at, what kind of could be, we could look at, it's a little hard to see here, but if you look towards the top left and then also extending out to the top right, you see access points, and these are staircases that would start from the middle of the deck, or the deck floor, and then start to traverse up to a second floor, and you could potentially even have a third floor on there. On the first floor, what we did just to get the conversation started was to say, how do we incorporate what's already there and start that as a presentation, but also ask the questions for the community. Is this really the footprint, and is this really the amenities that you want to see, or is there a different reimagining of that? Some of the comments that we've already received is kind of doing away with this design and really looking at configuring it more of an anchor space in the middle, almost like a gateway and a transition zone to and from the city, and then extending out buildings to the side, and then having additional storefronts and baggage services and amenities down below, and maybe restaurants or eateries or event space up on the top. And so some of the ideas that we're getting, and we'll incorporate that when we come back to get additional feedback on that design. Here, this phase, or this map right here kind of shows what the second floor could look like. Again, you've got the staircases that are coming up, and there's an elevator that would allow access. This space could be substantial, and the space that's not used could have roof lines that extend out that could also be used for queuing. So as people are coming in, that gets them out of the elements, puts them into areas that are underneath structures, as well as having a place to just relax. And then this map is showing what a footprint of a potential third deck could look like also. So we could go, up high, or we could stop at just one or two decks. It really is going to be determined, one, on how much willingness and how much of a desire from the community is there to have additional amenities out there, and really reimagine this as kind of like a destination of its own, or the constraints of the funding that we have. Right now, the city has secured about $13 million, but as you know, especially when constructing things, that $13 million, while it sounds like a lot, could go really fast. And so we want to make sure that we're cognizant of the funding that we have while continuing to seek out additional funding sources, and also look at ways that we could build this in phases if need be, if there are opportunities out there. This map right here is just, or this slide right here, just kind of talks about the blocking. So this is looking at, in terms of scale, right here, what you're looking at is the west elevation. So this is on the harbor side. If you were in the harbor looking out, this is approximately the view shed that you would have. And then you have the north elevation. The next slide is looking into the harbor, so looking outside and in from the ocean, looking in, and this is kind of the view you would get, just as the conceptual design is proposed. It's not necessarily going to be the actual footprint. Just to give people an idea of what we're kind of talking about, if we superimpose the general footprint of this and showed it in relation to the scale of another iconic structure here, the Catalina Casino, you can see that it's providing more of a complementary view, not taken away from that, because we still want to make sure that that structure remains iconic and still remains very prominent in the skyline for Avalon, and this is blending in and hopefully is designed in a way that it feels like it's always been a part of the community. This slide here talks about other opportunities to phase in other projects. So again, you've got the footprint, that outline of the mole structure. We could have some additional phases where we are looking at some wharfing improvements. So we're adding things like seating, fishing bays, an elevated deck, or maybe even incorporating some green space onto the deck itself. Towards the end, where the little purple capsule is, those could be expansions to the mole, as well as the little elbow inside. We could also look at some additional mole improvements all the way out in the far tip on the far right-hand side, along with continued improvements to the floats themselves, floats 4 and 5 in particular. And maybe this is also could be an opportunity for us to redesign how people board onto the Catalina Express. And so maybe not necessarily boarding right now where decks 1 and 2 are, but pushing that out a little bit farther, which would allow us to reduce the slope requirements and get people who have disability or mobility issues a much easier time to get in and out of there. So those are future phases that we've been thinking about, and we are packaging up as a more of a complete vision on there. When we're presenting this to the community, we're also kind of giving them some of the architectural inspirations from around here. So these will be incorporated into a final design. And so we wanted to look around and get a better sense of what kind of architectural stylings do we have. You know, there's a lot of very Southern California Spanish Moorish design stylings in here, from the iconic arch to the Island Spa and the casino, and then some of the tilings. A lot of public art can be incorporated into the final design of that. We also have other views in other newer buildings that have kind of come in and taken advantage of that to give it a little bit more of a modern feel. This slide here is looking at just some design inspiration. So as we're talking to the public, to give them more of an idea of some of the concepts that we can go through, you know, the staircases, if we have stairs built into the mole leading up to the second or third deck, you know, are they just functional stairs, or can those stairs be used as gathering places, invite a sense of waiting and a sense of community and a sense of place into that? And you can see that in some of the pictures on the left-hand side. There's also some public art that's incorporated into the stylings. There's pictures here for inspiration of other green spaces coupled with the stairs out on the top right-hand side. And then the picture down below where it says Ballast Point, that could be an envisioned restaurant up on that second deck, or another event space up on the second deck where people can gather. And you could see how something like that could be incorporated into a reimagined ferry terminal there. This slide is just looking at, ways that public art has been incorporated into other public spaces, and some of the design inspirations that could be incorporated in. And then same with this one. So this picture is taking that block form and then just adding a little bit of basic computer generated stylings on there, just to give people a little bit better sense of what this could look like, not necessarily what it's going to look like. There's a lot of really great ideas that are floating out there. This design concept is definitely going to change. Again, this is just to get that conversation started. So what we're looking at today is to get approval from the mitigated neg deck, approve the resolution, and we will be coming back at other touch points to get some additional input from the planning commissioners. We will be, once this has been approved, we will be finalizing the federal side of the environmental docs, the NEPA requirements and the categorical exclusions very shortly. And then once that's done, we'll be finishing up with some of the initial community stakeholder meetings, incorporating that into a much more complete and robust conceptual design, and then we will be putting that out to bid. And so we're hoping to have this out for a design bid build RFP sometime in early fall, with an award of that contract by the end of this calendar year. And I also have Bob Greenlaw, the Public Works Director, who can speak to a lot more of the engineering nuances and some of that information as well. So I'm going to hand that over in case you wanted to add anything.
Good evening, Commission. Bob Greenlaw, Director of Public Works for the City of Avalon. I think a couple things I want to add to what Michael had said. We've had a lot of community involvement so far, and we've done that through City Council meeting. We had a community meeting, and we intend to have more community meetings. We've held stakeholder groups, okay? And so the stakeholder groups are like the Catalina Express. So our tenants out there, the Chamber Executive Board, we had a touch-out meeting with them. And then we've met with individuals. So what I want to do is invite anybody, an individual or a group that needs more information. We'll meet with you one-on-one and go over the details as we develop this project. Because what we say, we're the facilitators of getting the project together. It's really the community's project. And we want the project, when it's done, to deliver the project that the community wants. When it's done, that you go out there and say, wow, what an improvement that this is, So that's what we wanted to do. And then also I wanted to point out, as far as when we get ready to get the project approval and certify the environmental document, usually we're at about a 60% stage of through our design plans. But we have chosen a different way of delivering the construction on this project that's normally not here on the City of Avalon, because it is a larger project, and because we have the constraints of here delivering construction on the island. So versus design it and bid it and build it, we're going to do design build here. So in doing that, you're going to see a lot of the design, the major specific design that you want to put input in that contract. And that's what we're ramping up to do, is get that RFP that Michael had talked about ready to go. So we've got to be able to package that RFP within a scope and the constraints, so we don't get something, we tell them what they're bidding on, because really what they're bidding on is designing it and all the way through construction. So that's why we've got to do this effort right now. And so it's not a minor design effort, but it's more a conceptual design effort, but you'll still have time for input and we'll still be back for permits. So there's plenty of input still to put on this, okay? I'm here for any questions as far as specific topics that we want to talk about, as far as where we've been or where we're heading. We do plan some more community meetings to tell everybody what we've heard from the way our process is. We have the community meetings, we have group meetings, We have meetings with the agency, with the other agencies that are our partners in this. And then we tell everybody, come back, and we go through those groups again and iterate through it and tell everybody what we've heard. And then we also iterate our design during that time for the good pieces that we've heard that it seems like we have a lot of community support for to integrate those into it. You'll see the design morph over that time. So that's our process.
I only had one comment. It looked like we were creating a lot of restaurant or retail space in there. Seems great.
Yes, there's possibility. And one important point of that, and I can say that at least what we realized is that the mole has not been maintained, I think, to the level that we need to have maintain it, because right now it's falling down. And we need to be able to maintain our building. And some of that is actually the economics of it. Yeah. That was, besides having that sense of place and having those other visitor amenities, which I think when you go to a multimodal facility these days, just like what they did to Long Beach Airport, you know, you go there and there's a little more of an experience than there used to be. Well, we want to do that even more so. And so that's why we want to do that, but also to be able to get that get some of that maintenance dollars in. It's not that the city's in it to make a profit. We're in it to be able to maintain it, you know, and that's what we want to deliver to the community by having some of those support functions that could have some other leases involved into it, you know.
The only other thing I'd say about it, though, is we're creating these more uses for other people to go down there. But then I see pictures of green belts in the middle of the parking lot, which there's already not enough area to pull in. And so I think we'd have to reimagine the parking down there very much so if you were going to put that sort of stuff, because it looks like we were losing parking and gaining retail. And
yes, I think as we go out into some other phases here, it could be 3, 4, 5, as you look out, that really to make this what it needs to be over, a period of 20 years, and so don't want to get too far out there, but, what do you do with the seaplane ramp, and as you get that next to the street, is there some more ability to even have parking underneath or park, and do you have a little more availability to get your transportation facilities more out toward the street and have, some of that parking lot to be more people area too, So there's different ways to set that up to process, and that this site doesn't really process. It works for Avalon right now, but it doesn't really process the people to get on to the land transportation, and realize in our next 20 years, land transportation is even going to change, so we need to keep our eye on the ball there, because right now they're pushing for electric vehicles, they're pushing for smaller vehicles, they're pushing for autonomous vehicles. There's all kinds of possibilities that will come in the future, and we don't want to constrain ourselves to say, oh, what we're doing right now is what's going to be there in the future. We need to make it adaptable for that, and so that we won't be tearing down hard structural improvements, So those are the things that we'll be visioning as we move through this. But yes, that is not a final design by any means there. Not saying that it functioned well. It was there exactly for what you had said. I don't think that worked. Now let's start moving stuff around. Let's start moving the furniture around in there and see where it does work, okay?
What is wait 1 second. Before we have opinions on this is a public hearing, so what I'd like to do is open it, see if we've got any comments, then close it, and then we can all just kind of open mic it and bounce it back and forth. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, so any technical questions for staff before we open the public hearing without opinions?
Well, I guess it doesn't matter. Why don't you open the public hearing, close the public hearing?
And then we'll go for it. Yeah,
I'm going to ask.
That sounds good.
Some of it's technical, some of it's process, some of it,
yeah. And I also just want to remind we can definitely have a discussion on the project and the scope, but ultimately what we're seeking is the adoption of the mitigated neg deck, which is really why it's on here. And if we want to have an additional study session or additional comment period on more of the nuances of the scope of the project outside of the CEQA requirements, we can also bring that back next month as well.
Okay, so I'm going to open the hearing. Okay, did we get any comments via text?
I have
or
no comments.
electronically or in the mail? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. So that part's done. And so, yeah, I agree. Let's, do what's in front of us. But I think since we're here and this is our review, if we could all just give a little bit of input, even though it's sort of outside the bounds. So should we first process this for what's in front of us and then provide design input second?
We could, I've got questions regarding the process, though.
Yeah, so let's do the process. Let's do whatever it takes to make a decision on this, but if you could spare a little bit of time, because
Absolutely.
we're all here. And
I just didn't want to go beyond the scope of
Right,
what was
so
on
we'll
the
get-
agenda and then
yeah, we'll get what we have to
the
get
action.
done first, and then
Right.
we'll go.
Yeah, I'll just to come in there. I think Mike's absolutely right, and process concerns certainly fit within the scope of approving the MND for proposed improvements. But I do agree with Mike, really, that we would be looking at, for a broader discussion about the proposed construction and design, that we would agendize that separately from what's in front of the Planning Commission this evening.
Okay. Well,
Okay, so walk me through a couple of questions first off. Is the money that you've acquired to do this, is it on a time-sensitive clock currently as we know it?
It is, that's
Okay.
correct.
So, and walk me through the process here. So I understand, based on your presentation, that the city is focused to really kind of narrow in on a design build. This is a very unusual project being done that way, because typically it's difficult to draw the line between a negative deck and a full EIR until you've determined the scope of the project, the full scope of the project. We don't, so if we're talking, restrooms, and I totally support tearing down what we have out there and rebuilding what we need. Totally support that. Adding an income element to the city of Avalon is a fantastic idea. Providing additional amenities out there is another fantastic idea. But I don't see how you go from a negative deck to an unknown end product versus a full EIR based on other elements that may be imposed in this, because we don't know, right? So if all of a sudden the scope of this project is, 5 or 6 restaurants and meeting facilities and all of those, technically that's a change of use, right? And it has other impacts, traffic congestion and so on. I think that the way this is mapped out right now, I'll tell you right off the gate, my personal opinion, that parking is a mess. There's no drop-off zone, So, but I'm not here to nitpick those. I just want to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's, and I know our attorney's on the line. Let's not get hung up doing a mitigated negative deck when the scope of the project may need a full EIR.
Okay, we're real close in the square footage, and we are adding further food amenities possibly, and that really it needs to have a partner involved in that if they are, because the city's not going to run a restaurant.
No, I understand that. But having tenants is not a bad part of this whole
Yeah, and so we're looking for commercial tenants that are recreation or food or visitor amenities tied to the amenities. So absolutely there's got to be baggage. Absolutely there's got to be some type of food service out there, and there has to be restrooms, there has to be ticket offices. We already have existing recreational kind of portal stuff. So I think the incremental change that we're looking at is there may be some additional food service which is lacking, could be lacking out there. Where that builds further out, and I think we've presented that footprint, is that there is a shade structure, which is decks, and that's what you see, that long length of that going out there, is that's really to cover the passengers who are on the ground, but at the same time, real estate's expensive here, so we also get that second and third bite of that real estate by stacking decks up there, and really more that's a hangout space than saying, hey, we're going to keep on stacking and having multi-stories of restaurants. So I hopefully we've made that clear. If there is some space in that second floor, there is an opportunity for maybe something a little more robust, eatery out there or something, or an event center. But it also could be it could be a harbor master office. It could be our harbor office that could occupy that space too. So it's square footage that's similar.
Well, square footage is similar right now, but because we don't have a full design, we don't really know that. What I'm getting at is, if you replace everything that exists out there right now, like in kind, I would buy that we're similar square footage. But if we're going to build an entire second story, or add a third story, or add a restaurant, or a brewery, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. I understand that. If we approve this as designed, it's designed. When we approve something that's not designed, where do we trigger the change from a negative deck to a full EIR? What's that triggering mechanism?
So are we finding a significant impact? I mean, that's what's going to trigger an EIR.
What did you say? I didn't hear.
Significant impact, whether you're triggering significant impact or not. And we are working on the federal side directly with Metro, because essentially what we're doing with the federal side is filing categorical exclusions, and they are on board with the, not to say that, I understand the concerns, I'm just giving a little bit more background. They are on board with the approach and with the proposed scope of work. I don't know how other jurisdictions have done this, but I know Long Beach did a design build for their courthouse and for a lot of their other building structures in that downtown core when they revitalized that. That's essentially what they've done.
Could we find out, because that's a great question that you brought up, because it is a significant change of use, and there, like you said, there could be an extreme amount of impact changes because of the use out there. And we don't want a flood of people, being triggered and then going, oh my gosh, where's parking, where's, drop off, all that. And we want to be able to know if it needs to be done, because it would probably cost us more if we had to do it after the fact, or, if it is triggered and you're already in this further than
Bob,
you should be.
Yeah, I guess when I look at this, thinking environmentally, it looks like a good setup. Like we're getting a core frame, and it's likely to have lots of stairs, this big of a footprint, this amount of parking, this little bit of green space, these landscape features, this impact on the shoreline, on the visual shoreline. It's kind of ticking all the requirements for environmental review, and they've all been addressed. And then if you do something majorly different, then you're doing a different project. So even though there's room for what style the buildings are going to be, or which way the stairs face, and that kind of stuff, you're not really environmentally review-wise. This seems like it still provides flexibility, but it also constrains it in terms of what you reviewed for environmental impact. So I don't really see a problem with a design review with this being the sideboards of what that design can include. And I think that's
what we're trying to do.
Right.
And really it gets down to, with a mitigated neg deck, can you mitigate?
I think this covers it.
Yeah, can you mitigate it so that it's a less than significant impact? Every project I've been involved where we had an EIR, I'm asking for a finding of significant impact. And so, and that's what we're delivering here, is less than a significant impact.
Yeah.
At least that's what our study shows. That's what our initial study shows.
Yeah, and it looks like the priority is getting people in and out of there, and a place to eat is secondary. It's a high volume place. People sit around, so they might as well sit on stairs, looking out on the water. And we all know, and a lot of people are new, so the more height you have at the main entrance, people can intuitively walk to it. All that kind of design features would fit. Well, within the scope
I guess
of work.
And I understand. I totally am in favor of
right. So those tweaks
making their first impression and last impression memorable.
Right.
I get it.
I think my point is, all that can be done within
So,
this environmental review,
so as far as,
unless they change the project.
like having vehicular traffic, I mean, we control the vehicles on this island. We're not 405. We're not bringing any new vehicles. We also control the vehicles that our residents use, because if we don't provide the part, we're providing different modes of transportation. That's what we're doing now, is studying with the ATP plan, so the active transportation is, even if there was, you desired to go out there and you were desiring, if there was a restaurant, to go out there, we would encourage you, don't take your car out there, take your bike, walk, go with a group, take the new transportation, hopefully, that we get, it'd be the taxi, a microbus, or whatever, something that would be really something that would look like the island. That's what we're trying to build as a transportation system here.
And I guess one of maybe the key question for us is, based on the framework that we have that provides some flexibility, is this environmental review adequate? Not that if we change it, it's going to need more, but just based on what we have in front of us, do we feel comfortable to approve this environmental review?
Right.
I think maybe what triggered your question could have been that this is just the start and we have a long process, and that things can change dramatically throughout the process. So I think that's where, if, usually you have the process down, you already have what you're going to build, you have the scope of work and all that, and then you would know what you would need to determine if it's an EIR or a negative deck. So that's, I think,
That's exactly
what the concern was.
We'll be here for permitting, okay? So permitting, and at that, it gets real specific, with the details on the design at that point. And so that's just within the constraints that we have with the funding of the project and how it's going to be delivered and what we're trying to get set up. That's why we're presenting the environmental document this time, and also to get the NEPA done. Then we get this robust design team. It's engaging with the community. It's in front of the bodies that are making decisions, and you get your input in that. And we want to hit this mitigated neg deck and have less than significant impact and deliver. What I'm saying is the community's project.
I think to Eric's point too, though, is the design is also going to be constrained by the findings of the environmental review. And so if they start designing something that looks like it's going to have a significant impact, we're going to have to go back and redesign that, because we're going to have to follow, unless we want to trigger a much more comprehensive review and potentially jeopardize more of our funding and potentially lose that funding, then we're going to need to be cognizant to make sure that the design continues to follow in with the findings of the mitigated neg deck. And I don't want to say it's a little bit of both sides, but it kind of is. Your point is well taken, and we're not trying to trigger something that would make it, but on the design side, it's also going to be a constraint, because we're going to need to make sure that we're balancing the design and the needs and the vision of that mole to the findings that was adopted here, unless we want to go back and put a pause on everything and do something much more comprehensive in terms of environmental review.
Right.
I guess we're also constrained with the elements in the site, with the form and function, okay? We have to have ticket ability. We know we have to have bathrooms. And there's a few functions that, with the baggage there. So that starts eating up the square footage right away. And then the environmental document describes, the little bit of expansion on the square footage. But, that's really defining, the gates around us, the guardrails that says, you're essentially going to do this, but we're going to get a team together to make it look good, to make it function good, to get it functioning in the right place. So the building may not be exactly here, it may be just over here, and that's the way to get a pathway, or to make the land transportation sync up. And is the baggage right there, or is it right here, because it functions better? And it's the whole flow with, once you get the design team here and they prove that, it's a proof of concept that we need in front of the community. But good question.
Anything else?
You weren't here at the time, but the last time we did this remodel, I think they redesigned the parking lot and the turnaround and all of that like 3 times before they actually got it to where it functions the way it functions now. So be prepared for that.
I'm prepared, and I'm
makes sense.
very much into transportation. That's been a major part of my career, and I have had a good team on this too.
Good,
And then
good.
our team that'll come up with the design build, we'll make sure they have that strength in there, and that we have the community. And just like we did with out here on the Five Corners, it's proof of concept. Set it up, prove it, come out and drive it with us, and make sure that it works. That's really the best.
Yeah, and not just drive it. I mean, this really is a multimodal transportation hub. So it serves ferry, it serves vehicle, it serves bike, it serves pedestrians, it serves other forms of transportation. It needs to be ADA accessible, and we need to balance all of those so that you can come and go within those modes of transportation. And so I would say right now, functional, yes, it works. Does it work as efficiently, and does it balance all the other modes of transportation? I don't know if I would agree with that, but your point's well taken.
I get it.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the negative deck.
I'll second.
Okay,
And that also authorizes the filing of the notice of determination and approve the project per resolution.
Yes, sir.
And second, that's okay? And the second's okay with that? Any additional discussion? Huh? Please?
Thank you,
Roll
Bob.
call or vote, please.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Glass?
Yes.
Chairman Hewart?
Yes?
Commissioner Say?
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam?
Yes.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
And so I encourage you to become really involved in this project, individually or as a group or, as the body here, so it's your project. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Do we want to set up do we want to have a general discussion on this on our next meeting?
I would love to.
For the design
yeah,
part of
yeah.
it? Yeah, if you could include us, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Absolutely. We'll get it calendared.
Just within the framework of what we just adopted to keep this thing moving.
Yeah. Great. Love it.
Yeah, that would actually be.
Build it. Thank you. I will not come help with the jackhammer.
Okay.
The next item that we have, and I have a PowerPoint which we'll get up in just a minute, is the consideration and additional direction to staff to establish a minimum number of nights for transient rentals, revising the 12-month requirement, and establishing fines and penalties for illegal transient rentals. I will just provide a very brief overview for everyone. So back in January, when we were talking about the transition from the conditional use permit to the transient rental license structure to regulate transient rentals, we had asked for some additional guidance or interest into the 3 topics that I just mentioned. The first one being that there's an alignment of the transient rental renewals to a calendar year rather than the date of issuance. We also talked about the establishment of penalties for illegal transient rentals, and then increasing or establishing rather a fee. And so in reviewing the January discussion, it seemed like we had some clear direction that there was interest rather to modify the municipal code to allow for a renewal of the transient rental license to align with the calendar year rather than the date of issuance. It didn't seem that there was any dissent in regards to that. And then in terms of establishing penalties for illegal transient rentals, the commissioners felt that there was favor in escalating fees and that those fees were flat and simple. Simple was the key word there. And however, in terms of looking at increasing the minimum night threshold. It did not seem like there was too much guidance. There wasn't really interest. And so before we brought this back for a proposed ordinance and resolution recommending adoption of that ordinance to the City Council, I wanted to just, one, reaffirm that this is still Planning Commission's direction, and two, see if there was any interest in looking at or revising the minimum number of nights stay, or if that is something that you're not interested at that time, at which case we would not bring that back in. This last slide here is just kind of a table, an updated table. I removed all of the other cities that we had shown at the last January meeting that had penalties and fees that were not aligned with your desires. And so I just included this. There's 5 different cities: Cathedral City, Dana Point, Indian Wells, Palm Desert, and Truckee. Each one of them have various degrees of penalties. I also wanted to get some clarification too on where does the Planning Commission see these penalties heading if we do recommend any of these. As you can see, some of them are pretty nominal at first offense of $250 going up to $500. Some of them are much more harsh in their penalty phase, $5,000 and going all the way up to $15,000 on a sliding scale. So obviously a big range. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back over to the commission for discussion.
You just talking about the penalties right now?
I'm sorry?
You just want us to speak to the penalties right now?
Or to the
Actually, to the whole thing. I'd like to get just really reaffirmation that I had the other two correct, that there's a desire to move forward with realigning the renewal process to the calendar year, establishment of a fine or penalty and what that limit is, and then the last one is the minimum night stay.
I can go along with the first two. The third one, I agree with that. I don't think there should be a penalty for minimum nights, as everyone's complaining that people are using transient rentals, and then the moment they're not using them enough, now we're going to tell them they got to pay another tax. You're paying for your business license, you're paying for all the other things. So minimum amount of tax you have to pay, or minimum nights you got to rent your house for, doesn't interest me at all. But the other two, I definitely agree. If you're renting out your place and you do not have a license that we now have, that you should be fined, and it should be substantial enough that they're not going to rent it out and still make money by doing it. As far as illegal transit rentals, yeah, it should be stopped. There's too much of it that goes on right now, and those of us that operate stuff legitimately, it puts us at a direct disadvantage for sure, and it does the city no good whatsoever.
Anybody else?
I agree with the first two, but I feel that on the third issue that we should have a larger minimum stay.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
I feel on the third issue that there should be a minimum stay much larger than one night. If you're taking advantage of this, taking something out of the housing stock, I feel there is an obligation to give back a certain amount.
But what are you taking out of the
Okay,
housing
wait,
stock?
before, let's not debate it today. Let's just see if we want to debate this next week, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I just need direction on whether you want me to bring this back, and if so, is there any additional direction so that we can move forward to action? I mean, that's really what I'm looking for.
Anybody else?
I'm all for a penalty, and a significant one. As far as the minimum number of nights stayed, you know, we just went through a rough patch there with even trying to fill hotel rooms and vacation rentals and whatnot. And, you know, who knows if we ever come across another pandemic like that. I don't know if we want to get involved in that side of it. They're already spending what's the business license fee on a vacation rental?
$53.75 a year.
That's ridiculous.
$50, too low or too high?
Too low.
But there will be a annual renewal fee that's associated with the transient rental, so they'll have that on top of the business license
What's
as well.
that?
We're still calculating that. Right now, we haven't received, we just transitioned to that system, so we're working with Finance Department to reassess those fees and then bring
So-
that back to council.
So you're talking about like when people book vacation rentals, you have to tell them they have to stay a certain number of nights in a,
No.
So right now, yeah, if you have a conditional use permit or if you have a transient rental license as a condition of use for your property transiently, you have to rent it a minimum of one night per calendar year.
oh, you're talking, okay, I
Yeah,
see
so
what,
what-
okay,
yeah. Anybody else?
Well, I would suggest maybe looking at a matrix. If you have a transient rental license that is productive and is generating the city decent revenue and is being used as a transient rental, their renewal fee would be less than somebody that rents it one time a year.
That's complicated, though.
Well, I mean, there could be.
Well, in a way, that's the same thing, because I think if somebody didn't rent it, let's say if there was a 30-day minimum, they didn't rent it 30 days, they would just pay the 30-day tax
they have to pay the
keep it
TOT on
going.
top
You know what I
of it,
mean? They
right?
would just,
they have to
They
pay
have to
the
pay
tax.
TOT for every night they rent.
right.
Yeah.
So if they paid the TOT for 30 days, that would keep the door open in a sense.
Yeah, good logic.
So they only have to pay TOT for one night, technically?
Uh-huh.
No?
That's correct.
See, what gets me is we play this game where no one wants CUPs out here, and then when you have them, we want you to use them more. That makes no sense at all to me. I mean, if we're paying, you're paying a licensing, you're paying your license, you're paying your, the one that is now associated with the new CUP, well, it's not a CUP anymore, but the new
license,
there.
yeah.
There's two fees there and then a tax. If you want to use your unit for a year, because most of these are all used by owners still. So that's why I don't agree that it's going to create
Yeah.
any more housing stock for the city, because the owners are still going to come out and use it. But in a sense, what we're saying is you're not using it enough now, so let's penalize you more.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem fair to me.
Anybody else?
Because I'm not putting people in the town, they're not using the sewer, they're not doing anything, other than me coming out and using my own house.
Yeah, but
I
I think it's a,
agree.
okay, sir.
I split mine. I rent by the month. I mean, I rent like 9, sometimes even 10 months by the month. Basically July, August, and September, I rent as a trans. So I'm paying one business license for rental, period, with no just rental. And then I would be paying a secondary one. I mean, I'm providing housing for somebody in the winter. I've been renting it to the same family that they did not rent this past winter because of everything going on, because there were 3 people, they all worked for the Express, and 2 of them worked for the Express and the Island Company. So last winter, basically I didn't do much of anything. But how do you know, but I also don't just sit there with a vacant unit all year, in the winter. And somebody's living there by the month.
And I would like to look at all 3, because I do think 1 day minimum is insignificant.
I think right now,
And part of it is, in a way, built on Bob's logic, that if, instead of doing a complicated sliding scale, there's 2 ways to do it. One is provide a certain amount of money as if it was X number of days being rented, and encourage them to use it. I think when we go through this and we look at who's got transient rentals on the map, if they're doing it 1 day a year,
Well, most
You
of
know,
them- most
yeah.
of them are
Well,
probably
basically,
not.
they're just
right,
keeping
so
their
hopefully,
option
and
open.
it'll also give us.
Most of them are
a-
not owned by someone who already has a
Right.
place to live here.
But anyway, I'm thinking we should have
They're
that
owned by someone
discussion
who comes
after
from Mainland and
a
buys
public
house
hearing.
sometimes to
No,
use it.
Yeah.
but really, I mean, the 1 night a year, that whole thing was about keeping your options open in case you want to do something. So that's why some
Yeah, so
people
is that-
did it that way.
So anyway, I would hope that we could have that, because maybe that is good enough. It's just keep your options open, still valid. I don't know if it is anymore.
Well, keeping
So what's-
options open
For the
is a
city.
decent thing to.
So.
Right, but I don't know if the
So
city's okay with that.
other than the fact that it's not, they have the permit and they're only paying a minimum amount a month if they don't use it during the whole month and they use it one day, other than the fact that they're not paying the city TOT taxes for that month or 6 months out of the year, on a regular basis, what is the issue? I mean, what's the issue?
Other than just trying to make the city more money for doing nothing.
But I mean,
Because
like.
that's what
I mean,
we're talking
No,
about.
to me, the
We're
issue
talking
is-
about the city making more income for doing squat.
To me, the issue is that what I'd like to think about is this block that we just looked at was 50%. Would it be if there was a 2-week minimum? Or would those start to disappear?
But-
What really is our transient rental? And how much are they really being used? And maybe we
Well,
already know that.
We do, because we just
So you
went
wanna
through
get rid
that
of
whole
them?
process.
Okay. And then the other part
Get people to
is-
get rid of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe it
we
does-
just went through that whole process of going into a license because there's no, I mean, I'm not ignorant to the fact we have no housing in this town. Nobody has employees because of it. I get it. But we went through that whole process of going from a CUP to a license, all this for years now, so we can stop the whole vacation rentals or properties are taking up the year-round housing. So we just did that. So hopefully, with that being said, I mean, we're not going to see any change tomorrow. We're not going to see any change, but hopefully in the near, in the far future or near future, we'll start seeing some changes reflecting from what we just did. Went from a conditional use to a license. So now I just don't think it's going to change it's not going to create anything that I think you're hoping to do, hoping the license will do that. Because maybe people who were getting the CUPs in the first place were getting them because of it was running with the land. Now it's not, so we have to let it play out on how, maybe there won't be a lot of permits being acquired anymore.
Actually, I would like to think about it a little bit more, but and just
I
include
just look at
it,
this.
even if it doesn't
We
make it, I'm
beat
not
this
sure.
horse
what it
with the
would-
same branch for, like Billy said, for 3 years. And every time we,
Right.
well, this is just constant though for 3 years.
But
And
I
every
think this
time we
will
go
always
down-
be evolving. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get it exactly right.
Well,
know
it's
what I
like
mean?
with
Because
Sandy, when
times
Sandy
change.
rents out her place in the winter because she has no one there, so now that's created housing for the town, and it's 30 days at a time, which is great.
And if they're living here, they're eating here,
Yeah.
and they're doing things.
They're doing things here.
They
exactly.
probably aren't
And
just,
but it's tax exempt at the same time. You don't pay the city.
The
any-
transit.
Yeah, so if you had someone in full-time, again, it's not making the town any
Right,
money.
right.
I just think we get to the point, I mean, we want to raise taxes on everything we do. Jesus, when do we stop? Huh? I mean, at what point do we go, pull your hand out of your pocket and quit handing it to everyone?
And
Because
but
that's what we're asking them to do again.
Well, no, but
If
the
we say
question-
it's a minimum number of nights, it's here.
the question is, should there be a minimum? And you're
Yeah,
saying no, and right now, I'm not being real persuaded by your argument. So that's why I would like to kind of think about it, stew about it, and
What's
include
the
that in
point
the
of
other
your,
two.
why do you think having a minimum night, what is it?
We've done this before, and we
But all it-
told you what the
he's right.
consensus
All it
was, and
does
then
is
you bring it back again and say, okay, you're
gives
still in
money to the
consensus, and we
city.
can argue this for
No,
days.
It's not going to make somebody put the property back
No,
on
if
for
somebody
full-time
applies for
rental.
it and they know they're gonna have to do it for 2 weeks a year, will that make a difference?
Probably not, because if
Probably
it's.
not.
Or whatever the
Who's it
minimum
gonna make a
is.
difference to?
It's
It's
just-
gonna make a difference to the city to have more money in their coffers. That's the only person that's
And
gonna.
If
then
they
the question
want it,
is,
then
why do
they're-
we even have 1 day as a minimum?
Now that it's a
I
license,
mean,
if they're
why are
applying,
we
they want it
tracking
to,
Right,
so they
because-
can rent it. It's not
But-
because it goes with the land
But
anymore.
why track 1 day?
yeah, but see, that's why Yoldie's right about saying
Because you
it
you
changed.
apparently need to use it. That's a rule that's
Yeah,
already
but
in
1 day
there.
is,
I know,
But you're
agree
paying
that
a
that's stupid
privilege.
too.
Look what you
Right.
pay for that. I mean, I
I
think,
gotta tell you, my CUP paid $3,200 for it.
yeah, and you're gonna rent it one
Everyone that came in
day?
that got a CUP or now gets a license paying the same kind of fee.
Yeah, yeah, that's what
The
I,
city gets their fair share of skin out of this. I mean, come on. At what point do you say, you know, enough's enough? 12%, we're talking about raising the tote again?
Well, I just want to know what the
Well, just to clarify though, on the fees, and I just want to make sure that the city does not make profit on the fees that it's assessing. The city is legally bound to only recoup the amount of time it takes to process the applications and to submit. We can only recoup the time. We can't make a profit on that, so.
You know, I understand that, but I was here when it was $750 to apply.
Yeah.
And I don't see how the hell it went to $3,200.
Part of that is with the categorical exclusion filing fee. There is part of that $3,200 is also the coastal development permit, which the coastal development or the coastal commission has stated that it's a change of intensity of use, and regardless of whether it's in the appealable zone or not, you're required to file a CDP. Plus, it has the processing fee for the original application. So all of those combined make up the bulk of that 32, and that's right now where we've been reassessing how much time does it really take, looking to see what those fees are, and have that brought back to council so that there's a chance it could lower, there's a chance that it could remain the same or be higher, depending on how much time is actually involved in the processing of that. But we can't arbitrarily, we have to justify all of the costs, and we can't arbitrarily raise that. I just wanted to clarify that the fees that are associated with that were established under a cost of service study based off of the amount of time it takes in order to process those, file all with the other jurisdictions and get that. That was my only point.
Good.
I brought this back, one, because there originally was a desire to potentially entertain all three of those. What I'm asking for is, if there's no desire, just provide staff direction with that, and we won't bring that back again. Or if there's a desire to flesh that out and have a much more robust discussion, especially on the item before you, the minimum night stay, we can do that, and then you could hash that out and then put that to rest once and for all either.
I thought that's what we did last time.
Yeah,
no, but exactly what we did
never got
last.
specific when we talked about.
No.
Right, so, I mean, clearly the third one is the least critical. I mean, the first two are more important.
The ones that are breaking the law.
I think, let's put it in there, because maybe we don't even want one day. I mean, why go through all the, you know what I mean? Let's open it up from 0 to whatever.
As part of agendizing that as a public discussion, staff will also bring back an inventory about what's happening in other cities. We can pull and look at other ordinances to see if, do they have a minimum, what is the current established minimum, and then you can make a decision based off of that.
Yeah, and I wonder if staff, I mean, is this just a chore that really is useless, you know, to see if it has one night?
Well, it's only as useless
because they
as-
pay for a business permit. You know what I mean? There's already
Well, these violations here.
No, I don't
right?
mean the violations.
Oh.
I mean the one night stay. Aren't we already getting their business license?
So get their business license, then.
So why do we, if it's only going to be one day, I mean, if it's not going to be at least 3 days, you know, why do we care? Kind of a thing. Because they already get their business license to keep the business going. Anyway, that's why I would like to have all three.
And I know the further discussion from the city too, and the chamber even gets into this about raising the tote again and again and again. Right now, tote in this town, from hotels and vacation rentals, pays for 55% of the budget of the city of Avalon. My God. We're passing 55% of our budget onto the tourists coming over. Minimum. We don't pay any of that. I mean, it gets to the point, you keep adding this stuff on, and everyone just, oh, no, it's fine. You keep adding it on, people quit coming. People quit spending their money doing that.
Right, and that's not something we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, but I'm just saying, it's the same, it's all tied together. Anything you pass on.
Do you have enough direction, do you think? I'm thinking all.
So does it sound like,
is it okay?
we're definitely reaffirming.
First two or all three?
Yeah.
Let's discuss all three.
Yeah.
Let's get it, because Bart thought we talked about it, he was given enough direction. I'm all about the penalties. I mean, there's a handful of illegal units in the island, we need to get our hands around that.
So staff will come back on a public hearing with a proposal and allow Planning Commission to discuss on whether they want to move forward with 1, 2, or all 3 of those pieces then.
Perfect. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. See nods? Perfect. So any reports?
I just have one quick report. Yesterday at the city council meeting, there was the first reading of the ordinance to change the definition for minor projects as recommended by the planning commissioners, and I'm pleased to say that that did pass unanimously. The second reading will be scheduled for the next city council meeting in 2 weeks. And once that's done, that will be codified, and it'll take, I think, 30 days after passage for it to come into effect. So we will hopefully see that implemented as we move into the summer season.
If that passes, that'll be 2 proposals in a row. Wow. Not that I'm counting.
Oh,
Okay. Any commissioner business? Business from the audience? None? Business electronically?
I have no electronic comments.
Okay. Adjourned. Good night, Tony.
Good night, Tony. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Rocio.
Yeah.
You're welcome.